Hello, and welcome to our second meeting of Communities in Place Policy and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Finnegan and I'm chairing this evening's meeting, supported by the Vice Chair, Councillor Jeffrey, and our officers and directors. Thank you for all attending this evening's meeting. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if you hear an alarm, please make your way to the nearest fire exit located at the rear of the chamber and then to the point outside the Lind Cross pub. May I also remind everyone in the chamber to please switch off your mobile phones or turn them to silent mode. If members of the committee or other councillors wish to speak, please could you clearly raise your arm. Please remember to turn your microphones on before speaking and then off when you have finished. I think it'd be useful this evening if we did a quick introduction just of names and positions so everyone can introduce themselves. Shall I start on my right and just go down, please?
Hello, Paul Anderson, Director of Communities.
Barbara Childs, Director of Place.
Hi, I'm Laura Parker, Head of Recycling and Waste.
Hi, I'm Mark Neal, I'm Transport Manager.
Good evening, members. I'm Andrew Smith, Head of Housing and Communities.
I'm Carol Algar, Corporate Project Manager.
We at the end, and most importantly,
Judy Carboni, Democratic Services Officer.
thank you. Listen, I really appreciate that these meetings are conducted in quite a formal way compared to previous PDAGs. So please feel free to put your hands up and don't be frightened to enter into discussions. We've quite a packed agenda this evening, so we'll get going. Agenda item number 1 is apologies for absence. Councillor Mercer has been involved in some of the responses for this evening and sends his apologies. He's a Cabinet Member for Environmental Health, Recycling and Waste in relation to agenda item number 10. Also received apologies from Councillor Beard and Councillor Utan. And do you have any others?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Brooks, Councillor Grant, Councillor Greenwood, Councillor Utan, I think you already mentioned, and Councillor Bateman may be late.
Thank you. Item number 2 is minutes. So thank you, Judy, for producing the minutes. I may remind members, if you wish to propose an amendment to the minutes, it'd be useful to do that 24 hours in advance of the meeting. But do we have any comments on the meeting minutes from our last meeting? No comments, thank you. So I'm happy that they are an accurate reflection of our meeting on the 7th of May. Are we all in agreement? Thank you. Item agenda number 3. These actions from our last meeting. First point was planning and building control, key performance indicators, KPIs. They're attached for information. They relate to queries raised at the March Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Also, there is now an agreed subgroup of councillors who wish to be involved in the community asset transfer policy development. Andrew Smith has been working, incorporating our comments from our last meeting for our next iteration. Hopefully it will be due very soon. I know that Paul was desperate to get going on that, and hopefully it sort of work towards the end of June as a deadline. And as agreed at our last meeting, we've now established a new S106 non-financial task and finish group. The first meeting has been held and we have considered the terms of reference, and they'll be looked at agenda item number 12 on our pack later this evening. Any further comments on that? Okay, agenda item number 4, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations? Okay, take there's no declarations this evening. Thank you very much. Announcements from the Chair or Chief Executive. Anything from Jim? No, so nothing tonight. Thank you very much. Item number 6, resolutions of call-in decisions. Don't believe we have any of those either. Thank you. Item number 7, responses of the full council or cabinet. Just wanted to mention on the 21st of May, overview and scrutiny fair space task and finish final report was considered and resolved at cabinet. So well done for the task and finish group members, and in particular Councillor Bateman for looking into such detail at the needs of young people, and in particular young girls and young women. Okay, item number 8, governance arrangements for better Billingshurst infrastructure. This is pages 19 to 34 of your pack. HDC has agreed to spend 1 million to create an infrastructure development fund for Billingshurst. It's designed to boost fundings from developer contributions to create a total fund of approximately 2.5 million investment for Billingshurst, thus making delivery faster, bigger and better. The fund is separate from the S106 and SIL spending, which are subject to their own separate and established processes. This item is going to Cabinet in June. There have been multiple stages thus far and significant engagements with Billingshurst community and for suitable projects. These are subject to public consultation scheduled for the 23rd of June to the 21st of July. It's not a referendum. A full consultation report will be generated. You'll note there's also a prioritisation matrix, Appendix 1, taking into account areas such as environmental, equalities and local need. We have a lot to consider here, from the spending panel consultation to prioritisation. And before I hand over to receive the report, I want to reiterate that we're looking at the governance arrangements, not the infrastructure to be selected. I'm going to steal Barbara's words here. She said, we're not looking at the good bit, we're not looking at the fun bit, but we're looking at how we get to the fun bit. I want to ensure that we should be ensuring that we provide a transparent and equitable framework for spending of council money. We must ensure that we set out the relationship between the council and key stakeholders, and that we ensure that the fund is spent on improvements to the public realm and or community facilities in Billingshurst. I've taken the opportunity to speak to all of the all of the ward councillors and also the cabinet member for planning and infrastructure. And I'm really pleased to see that all have been actively involved from the beginning, early stage. I think it's great that members are involved from the beginning. Questions have been raised concerning the weighting given to the consultation. As in, it would be dangerous to look at the volume of responses rather for a particular facility, the language related to St Mary's Church in the consultation, and also what constitutes a successful process. I hope you've taken time to review the draft report in advance, and I'd like to hand over to Carol Agar, who's the project manager, the corporate project manager, to report on the draft governance arrangements for Better Billingshurst infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That was a very comprehensive summary. Thank you. So the presentation, it's kind of a similar sort of summary, really. But the report before you is to consider and agree the governance arrangements for spending the £1 million Horsham District Council Infrastructure Development Fund. However, before I share the details of this, I want to touch on the background to the Better Billingshurst programme and the need for investment. Billingshurst is one of Horsham District's larger settlements, which means that it's a more sustainable location for development, and because of this, the parish has seen high housing delivery in recent years. This is in line with the settlement hierarchy in the council's local plan. Other comparable settlements, such as Southwater and Broadbridge Heath, have also seen high housing delivery, but these settlements have access to better facilities which have been delivered as a result of strategic mixed-use development in these locations, but also other excellent facilities such as the Country Park in Southwater and the Bridge Leisure Centre in Broadbridge Heath. Concern from the Billingshurst community was reflected in the Horsham Residents Survey in 2022, which highlighted the poor local amenities in relation to the level of properties being built in the area, and residents in Billingshurst were significantly less satisfied than residents in other areas about the council's role in making their local area a better place to live. So in response to this, and as part of the commitment in the council plan to pursue public realm improvements in the district's towns and villages, the council has created a £1 million infrastructure development fund, which is to be used alongside the existing fund from developer contributions to make a total fund of £2.5 million for investment in Billingshurst. So there's an established application process for determining which infrastructure improvements will be funded by the developer contribution secured via Section 106 agreements, and applications are currently overseen by the Planning Obligations team. A separate process is also therefore needed to decide where the £1 million of infrastructure development funding will be directed. The proposed governance arrangements in the report before you have been based on the Council's governance arrangements for spending of monies from the Community Infrastructure Levy, which were agreed in 2019. Additionally, a minimum of £10,000 is also proposed to be ring-fenced for a community grant to be spent on community initiatives, and this responds to the feedback we received from the early stakeholder engagement undertaken last year. It should be noted that these governance arrangements are only for the £1 million HDC fund and are in no way designed to replace or amend the existing Section 106 and SIL spending processes. It's important to develop a robust process for deciding where the £1 million of HDC funding is spent, with decisions designed to be evidence-led. And decision-making will be based on feedback from the community consultation, which is scheduled for later this month, running until the 21st of July, and then the emerging evidence base, which offers are preparing currently, and a consistent assessment of each project using the project prioritisation matrix. So this is the project prioritisation matrix. Is it coming? Is it coming? Oh, it's not coming up.
On a point of order, Chairman, if we are meant to be seeing charts,
Sorry, you are
we're not
supposed to be
seeing them.
it. I don't know why you're not seeing it, because it's seeing it on
In fact,
my
we're not seeing
screen.
anything apart
Yeah.
from Better Billingshurst title page.
I'll press escape and I'll start again. I did. Yeah.
So when you press the space bar, it should be.
Yeah.
See if that works.
Sorry, apologies for that. I was seeing it move on my screen. Apologies. So this is not a very good. This is not a very good slide on the screen, but it is actually in Appendix 1 in your in the agenda reports pack. But this is the project prioritisation matrix I was referring to, and this is designed to assess projects within a consistent and transparent framework. Sorry, it is quite small on the screen. But just to sort of touch on some of the elements in there, it does reflect the community feedback. It also reflects elements of the neighbourhood plan. It reflects some of the sort of council priorities and our council plan, and also our existing evidence base. It looks at kind of placemaking. It also looks at deliverability of projects as well. And responds to sort of equalities and protected characteristics of the criteria there, and also looks at the financing of projects, so where there's opportunities to leverage funding from other sources, and also actually the future costs of any new facilities that are delivered. So sorry, it was a very good slide there, but it is in Appendix 1 if you want to review that in more detail. So turning to the governance arrangements detailed in the report, it's a 6-stage process which is designed for projects to receive investment, and that will be the sort of deciding stage. Stages 1 and 2 will draw together the feedback from the community consultation, the evidence contained within the background report that's due to be published in early autumn, plus the assessment findings from the project prioritisation matrix. Just to sort of touch on that, we are looking at approximately 40 projects at the moment. So stage 3 will see the spending panel convened, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. And the spending panel will recommend which projects will receive investment. The first meeting of the spending panel is expected to take place in autumn later this year. And the stages 4 and 5 are designed to provide confidence to the spending panel and to the council that the projects selected are deliverable, and provide greater reassurance around the project costs, that it was possible to kind of establish that we have an idea at the moment of the indicative cost, but obviously that sort of later stages around stage 4 will help us to ensure that actually we understand the cost in greater detail. And then stage 6 will see the reporting on the progress of the projects, and the spending of the fund will be captured in a spending plan where we'll track the spend. So just turning to the constitution of the spending panel, in the report the Cabinet is recommended to delegate to the Director of Place the authority to approve projects in consultation with the spending panel and the Director of Communities, and award, finalise the terms of and enter into the required contracts to deliver the projects. So the Director of Place holds the final decision-making power and responsibility, but the governance process is designed to be collaborative, and key representatives from Horsham District Council, Billingshurst Parish Council and Billingshurst Community Partnership will all discuss and agree which infrastructure projects will receive investment. It's also expected that the spending panel will also can help to steer where the Section 106 monies can be invested, although obviously that will still need to follow the formal decision-making processes for the Section 106. So it was a very brief sort of overview of the governance arrangements, and apologies that I didn't have the slides to show incorrectly, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. That was very useful. Can I open up to questions from committee members first, please? Thank you. Councillor Trollope.
Thank you. I'm happy to take this offline later on, but could we at some point discuss the possible impact of what might be a renewed planning application for Billingshurst West, where I'm led to understand that the contract for the services that they agreed to put into this contract would still be applicable. I don't know, you know, I just want to, at some point we need to assess how we would manage the possible impact that that would have, if, assuming of course that planning application were approved and brought in time for the duration of this project.
Yeah, I think I only heard about the West of Billingshurst planning application today in the office just by sort of sitting next to somebody in strategic planning. So I don't know many of the details, but are you referring to the proposals they had at Jubilee Fields?
Yes, because they made a number of commitments, which they've actually, again, I don't know the enforceability of it, but they've actually entered into a commercial agreement with Billingshurst Parish Council.
Yeah. I don't know the
It's
details.
worth taking
I don't know.
offline and discussing the impact of.
I'd like to hand over to Director of Place for that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think Councillor Trollope we're happy to discuss that with you separately. We don't know when a planning application is going to come forward. We obviously will need to consider that carefully. So we will do that. I don't think that takes away from the governance arrangements.
Oh, no,
that
no,
we're discussing this
absolutely
evening,
not.
though.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say thank you for such a clear presentation. It's really helpful. I totally agree that governance arrangements are really important for spending £1 million of council money. So I'm happy to support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the collaborative approach that you mentioned and everything, but is not the County Council a key partner of ours? Yes or no? Why are they not on the list in paragraph 3.2 and on your thing? Because one of the bullet points mentions in here is create safer routes for walking and cycling, for example, non-motorised access and everything, but you haven't got a representative of the County Council here. And I would have thought that is a major, what's the word? Something that you've forgotten, basically. Omission, that's the word. I could think of the lacune is what I was thinking of, but omission. Should we not be adding the County Council in here?
So we are working very, very closely with West Sussex County Council on the active travel improvements. They have a number of projects they're actively progressing at the moment, and some are being considered this month, their moderation panel, and it's through the work that we've undertaken with them. But fundamentally the responsibility does sit with them. So they've been included as a sort of theme, because what we've tried really hard to do is to focus on the infrastructure that we can deliver. So you'll notice that there aren't projects about improvements to the schools or to the doctor's surgery, for example, because it's not within our gift to do that as a local authority. Where we have included some of the active travel measures because we can use our influence and our partnership with West Sussex County Council to kind of promote the active travel improvements that we've been working with to understand from the parish council, and we can use that influence. So they are a key partner, but they're not necessarily involved in the governance arrangements, because we'll just look at spending the monies for the governance. There's a sort of separate process for the monies for West Sussex County Council and the active travel.
Can I come back on that?
Yes,
Because
that's right.
basically, SIL, we receive money on SIL for everything in the district, but part of that SIL money is also earmarked in theory for West Sussex County Council stuff, if I can put it that way. And I'm a bit concerned that we don't seem to be, at least it's not overt in here that we're working with them. And I think, well, I still maintain that, are we not missing a trick? But fine, thank you.
I think just to come back on that, I think the Section 106 and SIL money, they are, like you say, there's clauses and there's pots of money that's been identified for those active travel, and that is there. I think if we haven't included it in the governance arrangements, because we don't necessarily need the £1 million fund to support that, there's already monies identified.
Thank you, Carol. Any other members with any questions on this? Can I open it up to non-members then? Thank you. Councillor Hoffman.
Thank you, Chair. obviously this is a new committee, and this, to the best of my knowledge, hasn't gone to the Finance Committee. I seem to remember going back, not that long ago, 2 years ago, there was a plan possibly to sell a bit of land in Billingshurst. Cedars might ring a bell. Can't remember the exact name of the land. And this project was almost going to wipe its face by possibly funding from a sale of a bit of land to fund this project. Are we just funding this £1 million purely from reserves now? We're not considering the sale of that particular piece of land, which I understand was a bit of a quagmire and did have some difficulties with it.
So there's no, there are no proposals to include the sale of the Cedars in this particular land. The £1 million is the £1 million that has already been agreed through the budget process.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for that report and update, and I hope that the points raised this evening will be taken into consideration before going to Cabinet. Thank you very much. Item agenda number 9 is the acquisition of 10 3 to 4 bed family homes. This is on pages 35 to 42 of your pack. The agenda item relates to the provision of more affordable homes for the district to meet the needs of families currently in temporary or unsuitable accommodation, often for several years. The homes are expected to be purchased with a budget of £5 million across the district where there is greatest need and where there's access to schools and services. The funding is from S106 contributions earmarked for affordable housing. This item will be going to Cabinet in June and Council in July. You will have noted that this item was also on the Finance and Performance agenda earlier this week, and they were looking at the financial aspects of the report. This committee will be looking at the housing policy elements of the report only. I've raised some points in advance of the meeting regarding the purchasing of new build without chains, the need for renovation and for good EPC rating, as well as the cost of getting older properties up to the required standard and in the timeframes that we're dealing with. Before I hand over to Head of Housing and Communities, Andrew Smith, I would like to ask Councillor Clark to provide a brief overview of the financial points raised at the meeting on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the Head of Housing and Community Services attended the Finance and Performance Committee on Monday night to present this report. And the financial aspects of the report were considered by the committee. The following points were raised. One point was the size of the problem. There was no feeling for the size of the problem. Basically, we were told that the problem is extensive in the district and that the need for 3 to 4 bedroom homes is rising. 50% of the list need larger homes, so approximately 300 households was the number that was tentatively put out there. We looked at the cost and the funding of an additional housing management officer. Effectively, it is felt that a full-time officer is required to take on the additional properties plus the ones that we're getting from central government funding. Some residents will need additional support, and there's a benefit of having someone available to head off any potential disputes before they become unmanageable, as they can become unmanageable very quickly. The officer will be part funded by West Sussex County Council, with funding possibly. We will know what happens under LGR. If the post continues post LGR, then it'll be fully for the unitary. The budget of £5 million was noted. The question was raised about what about the other £9 million in affordable housing fund? The Director of Resources view and a lot of the people in the Finance Committee was the fact that if we purchase the properties, then we will have some income from those properties to offset part of the opportunity cost, if I could put it that way, using my terminology. It came out that basically some of the remaining 9 million could be passed on to registered providers as grant funding, who would then provide properties with affordable rents and maintain or manage the existing stock. And then we would get, Horsham District Council or successors, but Horsham initially would get to nominate into the properties into perpetuity forever. The feeling was it was not an either or situation. The Head of Housing's view was that preferably a bit of both, and any way of getting affordable housing. And that would include CLTs. Why shouldn't we spend the whole 9 million? Well, the discussion revolved around the 2.9% yield return on any properties bought versus the 4% return in the bank. So this equates to a net loss when directly compared. But if the net loss is less than what we're paying to keep people in overnight accommodation elsewhere, then it's still a positive overall outcome. So that was thought to be positive. It's important, though, to see if we can purchase the right properties at the right price for now and not be rushed, basically. And we need to see how this goes. And if successful, the head of housing may come back and ask for more funds and basically we're treating this like a pilot. There is more 106 forecasts to come to us, which could help in the future. Approximately 873,000 is expected, but as this is not yet in our pocket or in our midst, we can't spend it until we physically receive it. The S106 money could be used to support CLTs. Sorry, Community Land Trust, for those who don't know what a CLT is. Housing are currently working with Chanctonbury Community Land Trust and Action in Rural Sussex, who are forming a housing association to discuss funding to assist. This would be a pioneer scheme. Arundel CLT have 18 homes, and that may be a good case study. There are other CLTs in the district that are being looked at. We also discussed the additional costs for any adaptations required. Basically, the feeling was that some of the families are just larger families. They've got a lot of kids, so don't require adaptations really. They just need more premises, bigger premises, basically. Some families do have complex needs. These are often mental health issues, but often enough these can be dealt with, again, with additional space, gardens, etc. And some of the additional space could be provided by something I've never heard of before called a 3-bedroom parlour type home that have an additional downstairs room which convert to a bedroom. So hopefully I've not repeated everything that that Andrew Smith is going to say, but basically those were the topics we covered at the Finance and Performance Policy and Scrutiny Committee on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Anybody got any quick questions with regarding the finance element of it, Councillor Clark's report? No, thank you. All right, so I'll hand over now to the Head of Housing and Communities, Andrew Smith, to provide an update on the draft Cabinet report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Clark for stealing a certain amount of my thunder.
Apologies.
That's all right. No, thank you, Councillor. Yes, really just to give the context again, I mean, I think it's helpful to have a look at what's coming down the line in terms of new 3-bed homes for us. So if we take over half of our housing register contains larger families, we know that new build affordable homes has slowed right down, not only due to water neutrality, but because of all the issues facing the sector in terms of compliance, fire safety, all the work that has to be done on damp and mould, build cost inflation, finding a workforce. So it's all but dried up in recent times. Coming down the line, we have 3 3-bed homes that should be delivered in Lower Beeding at the end of the summer. 6 about to start on site somewhere this year with an 18-month or so build programme. And looking at the whole registered provider programme that we've got, the pipeline, 56 homes if they come off and they don't even have planning permission yet. So I think members can see the size of the problem when we're looking at providing homes for our larger families. Housing associations have turnover, they have voids, sometimes 3 beds, rarely 4 beds come up for relet, and there's always a family ready to go into them. So what we're doing, we're working as hard as we can in a number of avenues to deliver as much affordable housing for our residents as we can. And the big need is really for the larger family homes, and as Councillor Clark has very ably summarised our discussions on Monday evening, this is one way of doing it. We do have a substantial Section 106 pot that we just haven't been able to spend over the years. Yes, if we can fund housing associations, provide them with a top-up grant to deliver the homes that we need, for example, in Cowfold, Fairfield Cottages, we're redeveloping that with Saxon Wheel. We're providing about £800,000 to provide 8 social rented homes. The government today have said they really want to deliver lots of social rented homes, so that's good. So you know that's fine, but they're 1 and 2 bed units. So actually, although it is a good use of our money to support registered providers in delivering the homes we need, for which we have the nomination rights, we still are not seeing anything like the number of 3 bed. And this proposal, members, does not give us anything like the number we need, but it does make some inroads into the number of families on the household. As Councillor Clark said, it's really the larger families. Many of them have children with complex needs. It is not so much the physical adaptations. When we analysed the register, we thought, well, you know, we may need to buy properties that we have to adapt, which is expensive, it takes time. But there really isn't any of that apart from 1 or 2 families that we're going to look at very specifically. Both Councillor Finnegan and Councillor Clark have raised the issue with me about, you know, how are we going to buy? Are we going to buy new build from developers, or are we going to buy simply on the open market through estate agencies? It is both and. We have an experienced officer working in Liz Williams' property team who has purchased all our 29, I think it is, homes that we've acquired under the Local Authority Housing Fund, which the various rounds have come forward to council to approve the spend on those. The government have basically given us half the money to buy homes for Afghan refugees and for Ukrainian refugees, and also for some temporary accommodation. So Emery is well versed and has good relationships with estate agents that will tip her off when there's a property coming that they think we might like to look at. We're looking at mid-range properties that don't need a lot of work, that meet the EPC rating and that will suit the purpose. Not too luxurious, though it is very difficult to buy a 3 bed house now that's not that old that doesn't have an ensuite. So, you know, a number of the ones that we have bought have got en suites because they all do if they're sort of 20 years old or less. So it's really looking at, and we may well be able to talk to developers about, say, well, you've got a couple of 3 beds there, they're not really moving, how about we buy them? So it really is looking at opportunities, and we've got skilled officers with Liz and Emma who will look at that for us and continue the work that they've already done in buying suitable properties under LAF. So really, that's all I would like to say. Very happy to answer questions. Councillor Clark made reference to community land trusts. Members may know that we have an agreement with Action in Rural Sussex, particularly their community-led housing hub, that specialise in community land trusts and rural affordable housing. I have to claim an interest in that. Is my background is rural housing, so I'm very keen to see community land trusts work in our district. They are complex beasts. You need a community land trust. That means you need committed people who have covenanted together to do that work. You need land and you need money. Now, the first one is fairly straightforward to set up, but getting land and money is difficult. And so we are working with a group in Pulborough, in North Horsham, and as Councillor Clark said, in Chanctonbury, where there is a possibility there that we can work with them and provide some funding for some homes with that community land trust. So, as I say, every avenue is being exploited to the nth degree to get the homes that we need. So, as I said, very happy to take any questions through the chair if I can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't to be crude, but I think what you're saying, Andrew, is size is important. You need that sort of size property to support the district. Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Trollope, question.
Yes, thank you. Have we considered building 3-bedroom flats? I mean, because I'm just conscious that the land would be perhaps cheaper because it's a bit more concentrated. I mean, and also, I mean, I can even think of down Books Road in Billingshurst. There's a big industrial type building that, you know, for the sake of being demolished and rebuilt, probably could meet a lot of this demand.
I think through Horsham District Homes, we have a planning application in for a scheme in Duke Square in Horsham. They're smaller units, and we're looking at London Road, I think 3-bed flats they have their limitations with families. And if you have families that do have little ones, children that have special needs, they need gardens, they need space. So we would look at that. I think to acquire a building, to redevelop it, will take time and expense and resource. So nothing is ruled out, councillor. But in terms of Horsham District Homes, we have 2 schemes, but they are one for smaller units and one will be a mixed scheme with some family homes, but also some homes for supported housing, we hope. Because there's what I haven't spoken about this evening is not in the report, and in that sense is the need for supported housing, is the need for extra care housing in Horsham District. And that's a whole other field that we could discuss, and we could help to fund supported housing providers. But it's just providing the family homes, and I think 3-bed flats are not really what we're looking for because of their limitations in terms of family life.
Thank you. Do any other members have any comments? Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Andrew, for your comprehensive report. I'm fully supportive of this scheme, but I do have some questions regarding future housing delivery as well for social housing. As was briefly highlighted at the Finance Performance Policy and Scrutiny Committee on Monday, you made reference to the fact that you prefer, generally speaking, to provide grant funding to the social housing providers locally as you get more for your money, generally speaking. I suppose one of my questions and concerns with that, which you may be able to alleviate, is having grown up in social housing. The concern I have with it is sometimes the control over the quality of housing provided. Because I'm not saying that all social housing providers are the same. You get good providers, you get not so good providers. It can be a lottery sometimes, depending on where you are. But my question was more to the point of through Horsham District Homes, which you've made reference to the fact that they're looking at London Road Car Park and Duke Square, where Horsham District Homes are proposed to be the developer of those sites as things stand. Have we done a comprehensive assessment on potential land that we could utilise for future developments under Horsham District Home? My point is that if you have it under your own scheme, you have more control over the quality of that scheme and the quality of accommodation you're providing. You might not necessarily produce as many houses. There might be for social renters providing grant funding to a social provider, but you may have better quality housing as a result because you're in control as a local authority over the quality of the housing you're providing. And as I say, having grown up in a social housing environment, that's just a concern I have in mind, is if we are going to be providing social housing, which is great, it doesn't have to be luxurious, and it shouldn't be luxurious. It shouldn't be all the bells and whistles and chandeliers, but it should at least be fit for human habitation. And I do have that concern with some social housing providers that you lose that element of control when you just contract it out to them. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, councillor. Just a couple of points. I think one of the positive sides of housing associations not developing is the fact that they literally have had to put their own house in order. So the amount of investment in fire safety compliance, post AWAB's law with the damp and mould, so now housing associations are having to, as soon as a tenant rings up and says there's a black spot in my ceiling, a surveyor has to go out. And that never used to happen. So the quality of existing, and the whole push from the social housing regulator to put the tenant at the centre of everything we do, that is the strap line, means that now the tenant has much more say in the property, say in the condition of the property, the responsive repairs that have been appalling across the sector, and the government and the previous government saw that that was something that could not continue. So in the sense of existing and historic social housing stock, a considerable amount of work is doing to bring that up to what it should be, also in terms of sustainability, EPC ratings and so on. Secondly, the last 2 schemes that we've seen delivered in Horsham District, both by Saxon Will, one at Turpit Court off New Street, and recently last week we went to see the opening of a Cobbler's Court in Slimfold. I'd live in those. They're lovely and they are exactly what they should be, high quality. And again, the regulator and the housing, and I was going to call it the Housing Corporation, shows how old I am, the Homes England now have very specific standards for new build social housing. So indeed, again, it's not either or. So with Horsham District Homes, we are small, very small, maybe perfectly formed, but very small. So the scope we have for development now, particularly when we're thinking of the new combined authority, is quite limited. So the reason I think if at all possible, we fund affordable housing providers, our partners, particularly Saxon Will, with whom we have a very good relationship, and there is a new chief executive who is really saying all the right things. Then you know that there's a legacy for our people in the future. That Saxon Will, for example, is a Horsham-centric housing association that will be here long after we are. So again, it's not either or, but I think really realistically, and looking at what the regulator has said and what Homes England has said, I think, Councillor Jeffrey, I can assure you that both you and I would love to live in a new social home. I hope that sort of answers your question. I'm sorry if I'm a preacher, but it's quite passionate about this, as you probably see.
Sorry, Councillor Jeffrey, do you have anything to come back on that?
Yeah. If I could just follow up very quickly, I appreciate the answer, Andrew. Thank you. Maybe I'm getting too cynical in my young age too quickly, but and with my, as I say, I had previous experience, and I do understand there are always going to be good providers. There are always good providers that are around. So I'm not knocking all of them at all. Not for one moment. And I know you do reference the new standards and the guidelines that have come out. And maybe perhaps I've just been looking at too much older stock where they have had those existing problems. But even though the guidance is there, I do sometimes question whether the housing providers are always following that guidance, or if they're putting too much trust in external contractors and the jobs aren't being done properly. I'm happy to take this offline and have a conversation with you about it later. I'd welcome that. But as I say, just coming back to my original question, just as a quick follow-up, has there been any work done on identifying any land potentially that we could use for development? I know you said there's limited scope, potentially because of the unitary authorities upcoming, but it was just more of a point of curiosity. Yes,
I mean, there has been a land sweep done by my predecessor and the predecessor to Liz Williams when the housing company was set up, and I think London Road, Duke Square came out of that, and there will be other land as well. And I would actually agree with you, Councillor Jeffrey. I think sometimes housing associations are having to catch up, and this is something we spoke about briefly on Monday around housing management. And in the report, and I think you raised this before the meeting, that you were concerned that if we were increasing the stock that we were responsible for, we had to have equivalent housing management. You were absolutely right about that, and that is in the report, and we have that approval, or we have certainly the funding from West Sussex County Council, and we've done the math so that we can appoint another housing management officer, because actually looking after our tenants is essential. And as I said on Monday, if you're a housing manager, officer, if you're in a social home and they're based in Winchester, they are not going to come out and see you very often. And it's essential that we have those officers and housing providers, social housing providers, have the officers on the ground that can know the patch, know the tenants, support the tenants, help them when things get a bit sticky. And that used to happen. And I think to go forward, we have to go backward and go back to those patch officers.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for that reassurance about the management of these homes going forward. Every little helps, and I know this is a major problem. We've been sitting on Section 106 money for a very long time that needs to be spent on providing homes for those larger families. As I say, I welcome this. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Clark.
Just to confirm what Andrew Smith said, having sat through it myself several times, we actually did sweeps 2 or 3 times in the past 10 years looking at the land, every single plot of land that the district council owns. And as he said, that's when Duke Square and the London Road car park came out. So that exercise has been done several times.
Any non-members have any comments? No. Okay, thank you. Well, I think we've fully explored the financial aspects as well as the housing policy aspects, and I think overall everyone's very positive about spending this S106 money. So I hope that, Andrew, thank you for your reports, and I hope these points will be taken into consideration before going to Cabinet. Thank you. Okay, on to agenda item number 10. This is the purchase of 7 refuse collection vehicles, pages 43 and 44 of your pack. The report details the proposal to purchase 7 new refuse collection vehicles to replace 7 aged vehicles which are in poor condition, causing numerous breakdowns and compromising the council's reputation and staff morale. In addition to the 7 vehicles, the recommendation is to replace 2 more bin lifts which are in poor condition. You'll see from the report that there was hope of extending the life of the current vehicles for a number of years, so that HDC would be in a position to purchase vehicles of a more advanced technology such as EV or hydrogen in the future. Unfortunately, it's reported that there is nothing of this nature currently that can meet the demands of the fleet. HDC clearly needs to maintain, well, it's got an excellent service, at least an adequate service. I had asked questions about the lessons learnt regarding the framework agreements as well as the scrap value. I'd like to add tonight that this council declared a climate and ecological emergency, strengthening the council's move forward with its carbon neutral agenda. In August 23, HDC reported to have reduced its direct carbon footprint by 57% since 2020, approximately 1,300 fewer tonnes of carbon being emitted. One of the biggest impacts has been said to be from changing the fuel used in the council's fleet of vehicles. I'm in the Green Group. My parents are Scottish. I think that a number of us would also like to have the make, do and mend mentality, repair rather than buying new, or forced to buy new, look at EVs. So I'd also like to know if any of the fleet could be EVs. I appreciate that it's not possible for the entire fleet, but have we looked at alternatives that way? I appreciate that Dominic Bradley, who's our Director of Resources, has been asking lots of questions regarding refurb capacity, condition details, risk of refurb failure, and the impact on the new domestic food collection, which starts next year. To say this is a complex situation is sort of rather of an understatement. And I also believe that the quote may have increased, so we might hear a bit about that. This item will be going to Cabinet in June. We have only had limited information. This was being used to assist members with discussions, and it's not the full report currently. I hope you've now all received Appendix 1 as well. We've received several questions relating to this proposal in advance of the meeting from non-members as well as members. Councillor Mercer, Cabinet Member for Environment and Health, Recycling and Waste, is aware of the comments and has been actively involved in responding. I'll now hand over to the Head of Recycling and Waste, Laura Parker, and the Transport Manager, Mark Neal, to provide us with a presentation on the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. So I put this presentation together to talk about the Cabinet report, and I've tried to incorporate all the answers to the questions within it. So just as an introduction, the Recycling and Refuse Service currently collects the refuse, recycling and garden waste from 67,000 properties in the district, which amount...
Can you just hold
Sorry,
on a
Laura,
second?
can we just pause for 1 second until we get the screen sorted behind you? Thank you. We're done? Yeah. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. So we collect from refuse, recycling and garden waste from 60,000 properties in the district, and this amounts to 4.25 million bin lifts per year. We have over 80 operational staff in this service area, plus the office and workshop staff to run the operation. We have 25 times 26 tonne refuse collection vehicles which carry this work out. The vast majority of these were purchased in 2017 when the council stopped running the side loaders. We run this service with very few complaints, minimal missed bins and high recycling figures in comparison with other local authorities. So in order to maintain this high standard of service to our residents, we are requesting to purchase 7 new refuse collection vehicles and replace the bin lifts on 2 others. So in November 2022, Cabinet decided to refurbish the vehicles. RCVs have a lifespan of up to 7 years, and with a refurbishment should last another 4 to 5 years. The bodies and bin lifts on the vehicles wear over time, and this is mainly what the refurbishment is for. Following a procurement process, a contract was entered into through a framework. However, it became apparent that the vehicles were not refurbished to the specification required. So through robust contract management, we frustratingly had to terminate the contract. This was done working with our legal team and procurement. The total value of the contract we entered into was 1.2 million, and the total spend came to 540,000 before we terminated. Because this contract was entered into via a framework, we did not have a clause to claim money back. We did, however, attempt to send the vehicles back for further work, but this took time, and again, they did not return in the condition we expected. So corporately frameworks are used all the time across the council with no issues. There are very few times they don't work, but unfortunately this was one of those times. Taking the council's environmental commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030 into account, the decision was taken to re-tender for a contract to refurbish the remaining vehicles. This is to reuse as much as possible, and this contract is returning vehicles in good condition. So there are 7 vehicles which we now have which are running into the ground. We are experiencing daily breakdowns which puts pressure on the workshop to keep all vehicles legal and roadworthy. It also puts pressure on our operations department as they have to organise for other crews to go out and help those broken down. This obviously impacts on morale at the depot due to the crews having to deal with these breakdowns. Everyone is working hard to ensure everyone's bins are collected on time, and it's rare when they aren't. However, this is proving to be more and more difficult with the constant breakdowns. Replacing the 7 vehicles for new will give us assurances that collections will continue for all residents. Phasing the purchase of the RCVs will also mean we can stagger the replacement schedule, which will prevent all the vehicles starting to deteriorate at the same time in the future. So we are asking to bring, which was 1.6 million, we're now asking for 1.73 because we're getting some actual quotes back now, which are coming in slightly higher than we'd originally thought. So we're asking for 1.73 million to bring the spend forward in the medium-term financial plan to purchase the new RCVs. Serious consideration was given to refurbishing these 7 vehicles again. The main barrier is time, because the main barrier is the time this would take and the lack of guarantee that they would last, which would result in a wasted spend. The cost of 150,000 for parts is only an estimate. As with all vehicles, it's not until you start to dismantle it that other problems come to light. It would also depend on who carries out the repairs as to cost of labour. By bringing forward the capital budget and purchasing new vehicles, we are guaranteed vehicles which work and will come with a 5-year warranty. Leasing could also be considered, but it's costly and it's not an effective way to manage vehicles. Based on 34 years of knowledge, we know it will have its challenges of ensuring there are enough vehicles to carry out the duties, ensuring all work is completed every day, and that hire vehicles themselves are reliable enough. Electric vehicles are obviously also considered. They're always considered when the council is buying new vehicles, and Mark Neal, our transport manager, carries out regular research into this and talks to others across the industry. The vehicles we have tested either are not reliable or do not have the range to cover the rounds, and this is still the case. We cannot purchase electric vehicles to just do the town rounds, as we need vehicles that can cover the whole district to the way our rounds are scheduled. Our neighbouring authorities purchased electric RCVs. They can only use it in the city centre, meaning it's sat in the depot for most of the week and often has reliability issues, especially in the winter. Electric and or hydrogen technology still needs a lot of developing before we can rely on it for RCVs in our district. But as mentioned, we do use HVO, which reduces the carbon emissions, and many other authorities are starting to use this. When we become a unitary authority, we will still need to collect everyone's bins and keep the high standard of service we currently run. Purchasing new vehicles will have no impact on future models or methods of service delivery. And just to say, Mark and I have spent time consulting with SLT, answering challenges with them to get to this stage, which is why the report was not finalised in advance of this meeting. This is also why we've asked to purchase 7 vehicles rather than the original 9. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. Can I open it up to members, please? Any comments? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question regarding, it's mentioned in the report that there's a current refurbishment contract in place after the previous one was terminated. I assume we're still having vehicles refurbished at the moment, but it doesn't sound like from what you're saying that it's actually extending the life of these vehicles. Am I correct in saying that?
So the original contract, you're correct in saying that, which is why we terminated it. But the new one that we procured is returning the vehicles to a standard that we're happy with, so it will continue the life of them.
You finished? Any other members got questions? Councillor Jeffrey, sorry, did you tell another question?
Yes, sorry.
Sorry.
I just supplemented. Apologies. Yeah, okay, thank you for that. So I assume with the purchase of these new vehicles, are they to go ahead? Would we continue to refurbish existing vehicles under that contract? I assume so. Okay. And just remind me, sorry, just a quick one. I missed it in your presentation there. You did say you could give a reason why we couldn't get claw any money back on the first fail contract, which was 520,000 spent, wasn't it? Did that contract bring about any satisfactory vehicles returned at all? And just remind me of the reason, sorry, why we couldn't claw anything back on that. Thank you.
So it was because we entered in through a framework. There wasn't a clause in there to be able to claim back any money if it failed. But I mean, the vehicles returned they didn't return in a terrible condition, but the condition was not good enough for them to continue. They're not going to last another year or two, basically. So the reason we couldn't claim back any money is because we entered through a framework, but we went through legal agreement with it as well.
I assume there's some lessons learned from entering into those type of framework contracts in the future.
Can I just give
Yes,
a little
please.
bit more detail on that? When the vehicles come back, all nice, shiny, resprayed, it's not until you start servicing, bearing in mind a legal requirement is every 8 weeks to have an inspection. Once we start to get into that, we then start to undo panels, go to valves that might be failing, whereas they should have been replaced. They're behind the panel, so it's not until you unscrew that and you find that they haven't been replaced. Same as wiring looms, they run through the body. It's not until you get a problem that you see that the wiring loom hasn't been replaced. So that's why the vehicles have come back in an unsatisfactory standard. And as I say, we sent vehicles back, but they would hold on to the vehicles rather than do any repairs. And then once we'd chased them after, I don't know, 10 days, 12 days, they would then make some quick repairs and then send them back to us. So that's why that contract failed.
So just to confirm, there was no point even trying to get them to rectify the work because any additional work they did would have been substandard anyway. It just wasn't up to the task. And just a final comment as well in terms of the proposal on EVs. I understand that the technology is not there yet, so I've got no real objection to purchasing diesel vehicles because they need to have the range to do the job. Or non-electric vehicles. So I don't really have any objection to that at this point. So thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask Laura, will the new vehicles attract a higher or lower insurance? Do we know? Will we have any savings on insurance? And also, you say that there's regular inspections. Would the number of inspections go down with a new vehicle?
I can't answer the one about insurance because, believe it or not, well, we don't have anything to do with the insurance. It's finance team that sort out the insurance. With regards to the inspections, there's a legal requirement that any vehicle, doesn't matter its age, is serviced or inspected every 8 weeks.
Thank you. Any other members? Councillor Livingston.
Yeah, I fully support the purchase of these new vehicles. Is any consideration being given to sort of protection for your operators? Bearing in mind that has been certain incidents in the past, have there been any improvements and safety features that can be added?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. So we're constantly working with the health and safety world to ensure we've got best practice in place. We have that in place now. We have the 360 cameras on our vehicles, so it covers across the whole vehicle, so we can monitor that the crews are doing the right thing, but also to protect them when we get dangerous drivers out there as well. And vehicles are constantly improving, certainly with sort of the bin lift operation, because that's where one of the main dangers are as well. So we certainly work with suppliers on make sure we've got the sort of the most up-to-date technology on them, things like that.
Thank you.
Councillor Trollope.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's good, and I'll certainly be supporting it. And it's been a very good presentation. The only thing that I haven't seen or read anything about is what's going to be happening with the food waste. Will these trucks be used for that, or will you be purchasing additional equipment for food waste pickup? I was about to say delivery, but not really delivering, are you? You're doing the opposite of delivering, taking away.
Thank you for that. Yeah. So the vehicles that we're intending to purchase now are purely for domestic refuse, recycling, or green waste. Food waste vehicles are a separate 13 that we've already been given, 15 that we've already been given permission to purchase. And they're a smaller vehicle as well. They're a 12-ton vehicle instead of a 26-ton vehicle.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's all from me.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Thank you. Did I hear you say that there are other authorities who do use EVs? I'd be interested to know a bit more about that. And also the other thing is I'd really like to maybe unpick the sort of narrative around, because EVs, as we know, are improving year on year. So committing to a 5-year term of this, when we maybe could think about even for half of them leasing and then going for a better one, just whether that's actually been explored and looked at, because as Chair reported, we've got a climate and ecological emergency declared here, and we really need to work on reaching zero emissions by 2030. Thank you.
So with regards to the EV vehicles, you get an authority like Westminster. They can pick up probably 2 loads within 7 miles. So an electric vehicle is great for the city. Us out in Horsham, it's a bit more rural, and we have a lot of ups and downs, hills and parts that we need to travel. So the vehicles at the moment, I mean, I won't bog you down with too many details, but an E-Econic, which is the same vehicle as what we use diesel version or HVO version, if we was to get that as an electric version, it's capable of doing 60 to 80 miles. Our average round is 60 miles. So with the bin lifts and any stop-start in hills and what have you, we will struggle to get to the full round completed. The vehicles we've tested, and I was only talking to Councillor Clark earlier on, he can remember one of the vehicles we tested failed on Berry Hill, and it was rather embarrassing. We had a crew stood on the side of the road and we couldn't move the vehicle. So we're constantly looking and keeping our eye on the EVs. They just aren't quite there. Another local authority we work closely with, they've bought 2. Most of the time one of them is in the yard. waiting for repairs, and the other one can only do a city round, which once again is very low mileage. It's close to the depot, and they've got a tipping site right next door to their depot, so they don't travel the miles. So it really is range that's stopping us. Otherwise, yes, we would be there. We would have electric vehicles, and we would be asking for a lot more money, unfortunately.
Councillor Fisher, do you want to go back on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. That's very interesting and useful. But would you just consider the point that I made about leasing on the basis of, because effectively what we're doing by doing this is committing to 5 years of not making that shift. So it'd be good to know if at least maybe a 1 or 2 could be leased and with a view to buying in a year or two's time.
Sorry, I forgot about leasing. So our experience with leasing is, well, you see the vehicles that are travelling around. The leasing companies expect them to come back brand new. We did, anybody who can remember, probably 10, 15 years ago, we did lease a set of vehicles, and it cost the council, don't quote me on this, but it was somewhere around about 40-odd thousand pounds per vehicle to put them back into a state that the leasing company would accept them back in. So it was a lot of money to return the vehicles. It could have been longer than that because I'm not good with years. It could have been 20 years ago. But yeah, in them days, it costs a lot of money to return them, and that's our experience of leasing. So we've tended to stay away from that because of the money that it will cost. Also, with regards to the maintenance of them, they like to maintain them themselves, and then we can't have the specific vehicles that go away. We can't guarantee that they'll be back in time to run the next day to for scheduling, so that we could have rounds that aren't completed and cause disruption to the general public.
Could I also just add as well, on top of what Mark said, that obviously these 7 ones we're asking to be diesel, but we are still in a refurbishment programme with the hope that in 4 to 5 years' time we can then hopefully look at EV or hydrogen for those vehicles.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a very quick question. I see there's 3-year warranty on the new vehicles. Does that cover all repairs that will be required under inspections?
So it's actually a 5-year warranty. So we've just got, so the quotes we've just got in, standard is 3 years. The quotes we got in is for 5 years. It makes sense to get the warranty for 5 years. And that also allows us, should EVs be coming, we would probably get about return on our vehicles if we returned them within 5 years instead of running for the full 7 years. So.
Thank you. Does that cover all defects and repair work that's required during that 5-year period?
It will cover everything that's not our fault. So so if we crash a vehicle, if we back into a wall, no, it won't cover it. But anything standard, similar to your car, yes, it will.
We'll go to Councillor Clark next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's also valuable to expand a bit on what the officers were saying, because we're looking at purchasing some vehicles, which is only 30% of the fleet. I mean, I calculated that to be 23 or 24, but I think I was told it was 25. We said that the first phase of refurbishment was a failure, it didn't work, and now we're looking at a second phase. But I think it's worth officers explaining a bit where we're going with the vehicles that are left, and I think it would be useful for the members of the committee to understand that process, which hasn't come out yet. Thank you.
Yeah, so sorry if we haven't explained that clearly enough for you. So it is, so the first tranche was no good. These are the ones that we're looking to replace. The second tranche have gone to a different company, and they're coming back. And because of our experience with the first company, when they come back, we have to do what's called a initial use inspection. And this time we take the panels off, we make sure that everything's been fitted, and we do look at the parts that have been replaced or haven't been replaced, and then we can call on them and say, wait a minute, this part hasn't been done. So all the rest of the vehicles, so there's 7, so there's what's there, about 14 left to go. They're due for replay. We've got 3 up there now being refurbished at the moment, so that leaves another 11, and they are all intended to be refurbished to the standard that we require.
Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a quick clarification following on from Councillor Vickers' question regarding the warranty on the vehicles. Just for my understanding, is the increase in the budget being requested because of that extended warranty? Is that why the cost has increased? Just for clarification, because that wasn't quite clear. Thank you.
It does add extra money to it, yes.
But it's not all of it.
But no, it's not all. It's not all of that. Some of the extra money is because we've now got an official quote come in instead of what we were looking at, what we were told by our sales reps. Once we add on, we've probably got £14,000 worth of extras: CCTV cameras, safety reversing radars, various bits and pieces. So that adds to the cost. So that is the extra cost.
Thank you.
Any other members? Any members first? I'll go to non-members. Councillor Ellis Brown.
Yes, thank you. Mine is not regarding the purchase of the equipment. Mine is about performance, and possibly might not be the right meeting, but what we've heard this evening is a lot of variables. You know, we're servicing vehicles, some are not serviceable. Does that mean they can't go out on collection? We've heard if they come back late, that creates problems. Yet when we measure performance, we're measuring by an attribute, and that is we have a fixed target, and that is, I think, 80, well, up to 80 missing per 100,000, where in fact we should have a variable to reflect the variability of what we're delivering. So I think that's something I would discuss with Dom around the KPIs and putting that variability in there, so we have it might be the top limit is 80, or maybe the mean might be 80, and we have variation from that. And as long as we're in that variation, we're doing very well. So I think we need to think about how we actually report on the performance. Thank you.
Anyone like to come back on that? Thank you. Well, that be noted. Thank you. Councillor Hogburn.
Thank you, Chair. I think some people in the room might be aware that I did raise a lot of questions based on the placeholder. I did speak to the Cabinet member for Waste and Recycling on the phone, and he did explain that the Cabinet report wasn't available and it was just a placeholder, because I guess I was deeply frustrated that you're asking to spend £1.6 million and there's just, I'm going to use the word flippant, A4 page. So I was very disappointed, and I look at things from an analytical head, and I see things like spending £12,000 on rent vehicles. Where we take £1.6 million, you get 4% interest, you get £64,000 a year in interest, so you could rent 4 times as many vehicles as you're currently renting. So I was frustrated, but the Cabinet member explained this was a placeholder and the Cabinet report isn't available. Now that might be the transition between a PDAG and this committee. Obviously, this committee has been asked to scrutinise things and asked to perhaps scrutinise or preempt a possible Cabinet decision, and we can't do that unless we get the same information. So I think, going forward, this committee does need the Cabinet report and does need more information in advance, and it's great to have these question and answer sessions to answer things. So thank you very much for answering the vast majority of my questions today. I still have an issue, and my issue is around the Council's carbon neutral strategy. We set a carbon emergency. I was part of the previous Cabinet, and the plan was to carbon neutral by the end of the decade. The plan was to refurbish the vehicles, and they were to last the end of the decade, and then we were to look to move over. So I empathise that I'm aware HVO vehicles, 90% carbon reduction, making serious inroads into it with the HVO. So that's positive, but they still do emit carbon. My challenge is more of a leadership issue, and this is more to the chair of the committee, in that we've got a serious departure from council policy. The council policy was to move to EV at the end of the decade, just refurbished vehicles, and we're now being asked to spend more money on replacement vehicles. And obviously we must trust the expertise of the Transport Manager and Mark that's in the room, and thank you for your knowledge. On the other hand, there are councils out there that are using EV vehicles. There are councils that are doing it. I think we're the 74th biggest district in the country, so I don't know how many bigger than us have already gone, if any, and I don't know if it is just the small metropolitans and cities that have gone. So I don't have the answers to those questions. When I spoke to the cabinet member on the phone, I did ask, has the Lib Dem leadership team made an active decision to move away from the EV strategy, because to me it feels like planning to buy vehicles in the next 5 years that aren't electric, similar to what Councillor Fisher said, is almost planning not to achieve our goals. So that was a frustration, and I asked the cabinet member, well, how much would electric vehicles be? You mentioned the range, Mark. I mean, would you need twice as many vehicles? Would we need to grant you 4 million, 5 million, 3.2 million? How much money would we need to grant you to do that? And that becomes a leadership decision for cabinet and the council or certainly the cabinet and SLT together to formulate a decision. Well, great, Mark's asking for £5 million if we want to replace those vehicles because he needs twice as many and a spare one. But that is a leadership decision, and I didn't get that from chatting to the cabinet member for waste. He didn't inspire confidence in me that he'd been shared that information. And obviously, I sat in cabinet for years. I know that you have pre-cabinet meetings and SLT, and you'd been discussing this for some period of time. So the ball may be rolling, and I'm assuming that given the lack of information that the cabinet report, that you really want to buy these vehicles and there's a waiting list and you need to get them as quickly as possible, and that lots of councils are trying to get food waste trucks. So I understand lots of the parameters, but mine is I guess it's a policy. I'd almost like to see in the cabinet report how much it would cost to replace these with EVs, and that it's been the director of resource, the director of finance has turned around and said, my decision is not my recommendation because it's uneconomically viable at this stage, based on your professional opinion, based on the opinions of another council. So we have more of a factual opinion, because the Greens, the Lib Dems, the Conservatives, we all have the same goal. We all want to be carbon neutral. If it's going to cost taxpayers an arm and a leg, we can make that decision. However, if that decision is 3.2 million versus 1.7 million, then the leadership of this council may have a difficult decision to make, and they may decide that, actually we do want to push on, and whilst it's against the recommendation of yourself, Mark, and perhaps even against the recommendation of the Director of Finance at times, but to me that's the issue I've got with everything I've heard so far today, and hopefully that can be thrashed out before cabinet. I'm aware that you've run the studies and you did it in 2002, and you said you're keeping an eye on it. So it may be a desktop exercise before cabinet to say, well, look, if I'd need 10 vehicles rather than 7, and these are the cost of them, and this is the price difference. But it's not just that; it's the electric charging at the depot, it's the waste transfer stations. But you can come up with at least a ballpark figure. It might scare the hell out of cabinet, and it might be it's going to cost us 10 million versus 1.7 million. But I think we at least need to have that to rest Councillor Fisher and myself and other members of this committee. Because we are talking at base value about changing a council policy that we have on a direction of travel. So it's not just asking for 1.6 million; it's a change in direction of travel. So fully respect your expertise. Thank you for answering the majority of questions, but I still think we've got work to do on this before this decision goes to cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Can I just add to that? If the routes were re-looked at, would that make EV charging, EV vehicles more usable? If the routes were changed? I think you often said it's because of the routes that you wouldn't be able to do. Thank you.
I mean, the routes are set up to be as efficient as they can be, obviously taking mileage into account. So I think what Councillor Hogman said, there's a lot of other factors to this. It's not just changing a route, it's not just buying more vehicles, but we can certainly put something together which will kind of set out what the cost would be.
Thank you. Did you have anything else, Councillor Hogman?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher?
I just want to say that would be really helpful to explore it with a bit of lateral thinking, coming at it sideways rather than just replacing it like for like. I think that would be very useful because we do need to get to net zero. Thank you.
Councillor Bateman, we're talking about the purchase of the refuse vehicles. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add. Okay, thank you. Councillor Knoll. Oh, yes. Sorry, Mark.
I think with the electric vehicles as well, what we've got to bear in mind is I got a quote from a rep that's just gave us this new quote for the diesel version. The electric version is £420,000 per vehicle. If we went for hydrogen, we're looking at £610,000 per vehicle. So with a brief working out, and this is probably only on the back of my pad here at the moment, we would probably need 1.5 vehicles per what we've already got. So if for every vehicle we need a half a vehicle extra. So I'm looking at the 14 vehicles we've got left to refurbish. We'd need another 7 vehicles. And then that would obviously 7 500,000, 3.5 million, 14, another 7 million. So we'd be looking in the tens of, we're getting above 10 million we would be asking for. But it doesn't stay there. It stays at charging infrastructure. Then we would have to look at, actually, we can't fit all these vehicles into our yard. So we would then start to be looking at new premises. And I can't put a price on the premises because, I can think of suitable areas, but I wouldn't know what the costs are. And I don't suppose, we would. So there's all those sorts of things that we need to take into consideration. Plus, we'd expand workshops because we need EV type workshops, which are completely different to the workshop we have at the moment. There's all the equipment that goes with it. There's the training that goes with it. So there's a lot of elements that we need to put together. So if you would bear with us, we can probably give you a ballpark figure, but it will be very ballpark.
Councillor Holborn.
Sorry, thank you for that information. And exactly that what I was expecting. That the figure may be astronomically high, and that may be why it's uneconomically viable. And the advice that's given to Cabinet and SLT is that they shouldn't proceed with that. However, on the flip side, EV charging is significantly cheaper than diesel. I mean, I've read that the average local authority can save £23,000 a year on electric per vehicle. Now, if that's the case, if that vehicle is, £100,000 more, well, there's a 5-year payback. And sorry, 200,000. Okay, so the payback maybe 10 years, but equally, an EV vehicle generally has a longer lifespan, or is expected to have a longer lifespan, so that the plan to change a vehicle in 7 years may become longer. So there are different variables that would have to be factored in. So the cost of fuel may be significantly less. The lifespan of the vehicle changing every 10 years rather than every 7 years. So there are variables. That initial cost does sound very, very, very high. But again, I just feel that we have a duty and a commitment to look at it, even if we say no, and that because this is a 5-year investment, now is the time at least to cover it, in a high level. Even if we haven't got the detail, but I suspect you've still got a lot of detail from when you last looked into it. As I said, you keep your finger so near to the market. I suspect you've got a lot of information to hand. But I think Cabinet wouldn't be doing a duty if they didn't at least have an alternative and discount that. It always says in the Cabinet report, other alternatives we've considered, and think we're right to consider leasing, we're right to consider EV vehicles, and we're right to look at that at this stage. And I think it's only fair that this committee asks those questions. And if Cabinet didn't ask those questions, I don't think they'd be doing their job. So I'm sure they will. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Holborn. Councillor Trollope.
Thank you, Chair. Just to take a step back again from looking at electric, do we have an idea of the emissions improvements we would gain from buying the new vehicles? And would we also then be able to then factor in the cost? I mean, let's just say theoretically going electric gave us a 40% improvement, and with these new diesels it was a 20% improvement. It would be interesting to know how much we're paying for that extra 20%, if that makes sense. Particularly if it's a 5-year lifespan, it would seem to make sense to have a good idea of the actual improvements that we have already, because we shouldn't compare against the current vehicles versus electric, but the current new vehicles versus the new electric. My point.
Yeah, I think obviously what we'll do is set that out in the cabinet report, and we can show. I guess the main thing is that the EVs don't still have the range, but we can put everything into the cabinet report so you can clearly see the pros and cons.
Thank you.
Sorry, one last point, and I know this is a pipe dream, and we'll always try it. But again, I would think maybe we could also, you know, if we are looking for improvements, is maybe another campaign of some description of getting people to be a bit more efficient in their management of waste. I realize that's a hard sell and it's gonna be whatever, but I think there is something to be gained by having people do a little bit more composting and doing all the other things that we should be doing.
Yeah, you're right. So we work very closely with West Sussex County Council through the waste partnership with all the other authorities in West Sussex, and we do continually run those sort of campaigns, particularly through social media. The Think Before You Throw campaign, which West Sussex are running in conjunction with us, kind of covers different topics every month. And I think with food waste coming in soon as well, you know, again, it kind of brings that to the forefront again, to try and encourage residents to think about what they're using, and to, even though we are collecting their food waste, that they don't need to be necessarily putting everything out in the first place. So
Yeah,
I think that will help.
I've personally noticed just by composting the massive reduction that I have of going into the waste bin. You know, and I'm sure the food waste will have a similar effect on a lot of people's households. So,
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor Trollope. Claudia, Councillor Fisher, sorry.
No problem. So first of all, Councillor Trollope's point about comparing is useful, but surely if you're looking at an electric vehicle, it's zero emissions to whatever the new one would be. So that's kind of an interesting point. I absolutely agree about the idea of reducing waste. Personally, I get half a bin bag for a family of 3 every 2 weeks. And that's because I also recycle soft plastics, which is actually the majority of what goes into people's bins. And I think that would be a very easy and quick win if people were able to know and understand about that. But the other thing is, I think it would be really important, and so I really appreciate that you're going to look at what we're suggesting, that it would be really useful to think about how it could be managed, whereby you don't work to the same rounds, because we are going to have to make this shift at some point. And the other point that was made around the need to change where everything is serviced and retrain, and that's got to happen anyway. So, you know, we may as well grasp the bull by the horns and actually get going on it, is what I would suggest. So that's worth thinking as well. So rather than going for like, so I hope that's useful.
Yeah, thank you. We'll set that out in the cabinet report. And with regards to soft plastics as well, we do try and push that message that can be recycled at supermarkets. Once food waste is done in 2026, the next step through this government simpler recycling will be bringing in soft plastic recycling at the curbside as well. So we're working on that at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Chair. This is just a trivial question which relates to your original presentation, but it has been bothering me, so I just want to ask, with the failure of the original refurbishment contract, were we able to claim any damages back from the refurbishment company? What happened? Did we just terminate the contract and stop paying them?
Yeah, that's correct. We just terminated the contract and stopped sending our vehicles to them.
So should there have been some kind of legal action against them though, because they didn't fulfill the terms of their contract? They didn't properly refurbish the vehicles.
I'm afraid the terms of the contract, because it was procured through a framework, meant that legal avenue wasn't available to us.
Okay. I just wanted to check we didn't lose any money anyway. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Laura.
Okay, do we have any more questions on this topic? Well, thank you. It's been a really good debate. I think we've explored that we've had difficulties with refurbishment, and also that's led to a loss of 520,000. The purchase for the new vehicles would be 1.73 million, but that's with the 5-year warranty and some extra add-ons. We want to maintain the excellent service that Horsham is known for. So I think we must take that into consideration, but also, I think it'd be really important for you, before we go to Cabinet, to look at the carbon footprint decarbonisation options that we'll be discussing tonight, as well as perhaps, as Councillor Trott mentioned, a boost of a campaign, perhaps with soft plastics or something. I know it's been an important topic for members, so don't forget you can also take the opportunity to make representations at Cabinet as well. So thank you very much for the presentations. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 11. This is the final report for Best Safety Task and Finish Group. It's on pages 45 to 60 of your pack. Battery Energy Storage System Best Task and Finish Group first met in December 24. As members reviewing planning applications expressed concern that there was no specific information for applications for BESS or for new developments close to BESS, such as DC 212233 Glebe Farm. Councillor Ellis-Brown chaired the group and provided us with an update at the last meeting. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Ellis-Brown to present the final report for the Best Task and Finish Group. We can then debate as necessary, after which Councillor Ellis-Brown will be reading out the recommendations for us to agree.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Before I go through some of the points on the report, I take it that the report has been read by the members, but firstly I'd like to thank the officers who supported us, and in particular Judy, who did an excellent job in supporting us, and the members who contributed to this very good working group, task and finishing group. As you've mentioned, we started in December, and we've had a number of meetings over that time with various officers and with the fire and rescue service as well. I'm not going to go through the report. I take it that you've read the report. If you have any questions, myself or Councillor Livingston can answer those questions, but if I may, just whiz through the recommendations. Unless you want to take questions first, Chair.
I was going to take some questions first.
Okay, apologies, Chair. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Vickers.
Just a very brief question. Paragraph 4.12, Councillor Grant said that the database wasn't up to date. Do we have any idea how many sites there are in our district? Have we got any rough idea?
I want to hand over to Councillor Livingston or Councillor Ellis-Brown to answer that.
I don't have a set figure on that, unfortunately. I don't know if Councillor Livingston can help us with that one.
No, I don't think we've got an accurate figure, but there is a national database which is probably lagging behind to what is actually there at the moment and hasn't picked up all the historical installations.
We're not aware of where any others are, only those that have come forward as planning applications.
Yeah, all we're aware of is what is coming through at this present time.
I understand that the big sites are understood by the Fire and Rescue Service.
Yeah.
Those larger sites are on the Fire and Rescue Service database.
Yeah.
It's just the planning applications that come through here, Horsham, and something we may look at later is the domestic sites. But the large sites are well known and recorded by the Fire and Rescue Service.
Any other questions before we move on to the recommendations? Okay, they're quite long. Thank you. Would you like to report on the recommendations?
Yes. Okay, to note the findings of the Task and Finish Group is one of the key recommendations, and Councillor Livingstone will be taking this to the Cabinet, next Cabinet meeting, which will be submitted later this month, I believe. Key recommendations are the officers maintain and publish on the HDC website a list showing location of new operational BESS sites. That is not domestic sites, that's BES sites, such as the one adjacent to the development we saw at, what's the name? Just the name eludes me for the moment. Leave Farm. Yes, thank you very much. The officers will ensure that consistent labelling of BES applications on the planning portal to provide better details of how to search for such sites on the council website. Information as per Appendix A of this document provided to planning applications be considered for inclusion in the local validation list when the next reviewed. And if it's not included, to agree that Appendix A be kept under review to ensure requirements remain up to date and continue to reflect good practice. This has to agree and submit this report to West Sussex Fire and Rescue Service and to require them to have regard to it when exercising their function in accordance with Section 9FF(2) of the Local Government Act 2000. To agree that the chairman of the committee will invite the head of development and building control to attend a future meeting of the committee to provide an update on progress with recommendations. And that is this committee, not the work, task and finish group. They're the core recommendations that have been put forward by this group. If there are any questions on that at all.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis-Brown. And just for formality, I'm just going to clarify that this committee is recommended, 1, to note that the findings of the task and finish group, 2, to agree to submit this report and the recommendations to Cabinet for consideration in accordance with procedure contained in subsection 2.9 of the Policy and Scrutiny Procedures Rules in this Constitution, and 3, that points A, B, C and D are recommended for Cabinet. Do I need to read all those out, or can we just move on to the last point? Right, so and point 4 is to agree to submit this report to West Sussex Fire and Rescue Service and to require them to have regard to it when exercising their functions in accordance with Section 9FF(2) of the Local Government Act 2000. And finally, to agree that the chairman of the committee will invite the head of development and building control to attend a future meeting of this committee to provide an update on the progress with the recommendations. Yeah. Can I have a proposer on those recommendations, please? Councillor Ellis-Brown, thank you very much, and Councillor Livingston, thank you very much for seconding. New slip up there. Are we all in agreement with those recommendations? Thank you very much. Just because we are now keeping a log of our action points, I would like to add to our action points that these minutes are to be submitted to Cabinet as per point 1, and as per point 4, I'd like to add an action point that these minutes are submitted to the Fire Service, Rescue Service, and point 5, I'd like an action point added to the minutes to invite the Head of Development and Building Control to attend a meeting in the future to update us, but I think that might be in some time in the future. And we may well add that to our work programme for next year. Thank you. Okay, item number 12 is an update from Task and Finish groups. This is page 61 of your pack. At our last meeting, we agreed to set up a new task and finish group on the S106 non-financial agreements, for example, services, facilities, infrastructure, agreed with developers but not being provided, and to look into further monitoring and compliance if required. Members of the group have been agreed, and Councillor Clark has taken on the role as chair. The first meeting has been held and the terms of reference have been drafted. It was also agreed that an email be sent to councillors and parish councils to gain examples of good and bad S106 arrangements, and those letters should have arrived with the clerks this week. As per the Constitution, these terms of reference should be agreed by this committee. I hope you've had an opportunity to read and review the draft terms version 1. Does anybody have any comments? Councillor Clark, do you have anything to add? Thank you.
Judging from the reaction of my own parish council, we may need to sort of chivvy the parish council along, and we may need to provide incremental logic and data, because my parish council was somewhat flummoxed by the request.
Any other comments? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Clark, for taking on the role of chair, and thank you for the rest of the Task and Finish group for taking on this work. I'm going to read the terms of reference and then we can vote on that. So, terms of reference. 1, to consider what non-financial S106 facilities have not been provided and discuss the reasons given, if any, for non-delivery and the impact of on local residents. To consider, identify local case studies of developments where non-financial S106 planning obligations do not appear to have been provided. To discuss with relevant officers and gain clarity on the current Horsham District Council process for monitoring the provision of non-financial S106 planning obligations and effectiveness excuse me, of the current regimen, particularly in relation to service facilities infrastructure which have not been made available to local residents in line with legal agreements. Secondly, facilities which have not been handed over to relevant parties as agreed, i.e. the management companies or local authority. Finally, to discuss whether a new process for monitoring compliance with non-financial S106 planning obligations should be considered, and if so, what form should they take? This may assist officers by providing an accurate audit trail, as well as improving public confidence in the planning process. So can I have a proposer for those terms of reference, please? Councillor Lambert, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Vickers, thank you very much. Are we all in agreement with those terms of reference? Thank you. I'd like the minutes to reflect that the terms of reference have been accepted by the committee. Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 13. This is the work programme, page 63 of your pack. The table shows our work programme for this committee 25-26. In addition to the standard items, there are a few key additions, such as crime and disorder update in September, and leisure facilities and contracts will be added to the programme when they're ready to be scrutinised. I would like to briefly discuss the crime and disorder annual update that's due in September. It would be useful for members to discuss whether we should invite the Police Crime and Commission Officer, Katie Bourne, or alternatively, we could ask Inspector Neil Durkin, Horsham Neighbourhood Policing Team. I'd open that up to discussion. Councillor Trollope.
I attend Neil Durkin's meetings regularly, and I find him very useful. So I think I'm nothing against inviting Katie Bourne. I think it would be interesting to hear her views as well. But I could certainly vouch for Durkin giving us a very good overview.
Thank you. I think lots of members do attend those regular meetings, so we wondered whether it would be something else that is required, or it would be very useful to bring him along. So thank you for your comments. Anybody else got any comments on that? Councillor Fisher.
I agree. I think Neil Durkin would be very good to bring in terms of very Horsham specific issues that he might be able to raise. Obviously, Katie Bourne covers the whole of Sussex and doesn't really have that much of a handle on the operational side of things, because that's not what her role is. So that would be my preference.
Councillor Livingston.
The Police and Crime Commissioner is the one that probably holds the budget strings and also allocates resources. So it might be good to have her present as well as Neil Durkin, because if he's expressing any shortages in manpower or whatever, we'd like to know, and we can make sure she knows.
Thank you. It's a good idea. Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
I was going to say, why can't we invite both of them? I think it would be really useful to hear both.
Councillor Lambert, sorry, I might have got out of time. Thank you. So I think I'm gauging from that we'd probably like to invite both of them to the next meeting in September, which is our next meeting. Thank you. Do we have to propose that? Okay, thank you. Item number 14, Cabinet Forward Plan, pages 63 to 69 of your pack. The forward plan gives at least 20 days notice of any key decisions that Cabinet will make, and contains notice of other decisions that were planned. We've already discussed a number of those items that are going to Cabinet in June already at this meeting. Does any other member have any questions or comments with regards to the forward plan? So I don't think we have any members, so Councillor Hogman.
I see the local plan update is on there, going to Cabinet. Obviously, there's been some, I think I saw Mid Sussex taking theirs to judicial review, which I read third party. I haven't actually read that on a Mid Sussex website, and we haven't had a members briefing on that at all yet. So I guess as the Director of Place is sitting in the room, it might be worth just asking what is coming to this committee, what sort of members briefing is coming out, and are members getting briefed on anything ahead of that Cabinet meeting? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I think as Councillor Hogban has correctly identified, there should be an all-member briefing before we take something to Cabinet. We put that item on the agenda because it had to go on the forward planner by a particular date, so it was a placeholder. I think that will actually be for a future discussion because we need to have further discussions with all members first, and we're not in the position at the moment to do that. So I think that forward plan item will change the timescale.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Hogman?
Yes, if the Director of Place is saying it's not going to Cabinet in the 25th of June, and then yes, that's fine. And I would concur with the comment that obviously members would be very keen to have more information before it went to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it on the forward plan. So the last agenda item is urgent business. Don't have any. So at 7:16, conclude the meeting. And thank you very much for attending, and have a safe journey back. Thank you.